I'm definitely no pioneer when it comes to using this static blackout window film for aquarium tanks, but in all the tutorials that I've seen, they're mainly for rimless tanks, which is a lot easier compared to rim tanks. This will be a detailed instructional video on how you can near perfectly apply this stuff so that 1, you don't get any bubbles on the final application, and 2, you get clean cuts on the edges. These two things are a bit difficult to achieve on a rim tank because of those edges, but I got you covered, so stick around. There are a few benefits when it comes to using this static film for aquarium tanks, and that's why a lot of hobbyists use it. It's cheap, it's relatively easy to take off after you're done using it, and lastly, it comes in a plethora of different colors: black, white, frost, you name it. The one downside is that it is not necessarily the easiest to apply, especially if you have rim tanks. If it's a rimless tank, it becomes a little easier. For those of you who haven't seen this or are new to the channel, this is actually a guppy tank that I did my first aquascape on. It's doing pretty well. I definitely need to do an update on all my tanks, but as you can see, it has clearly exploded with a bunch of guppies. I'm sure someone in the comments is gonna say this is way overcrowded, but everyone has been doing well in here, and when it gets a little too crazy, I transfer them to my grow out tank over there, which I'm not gonna show you guys because that is a little project of mine. But yeah, back to topic. As you can see there, this is a good example of pour application. This is one of the first times I used this vinyl backing, and you could clearly see there is a lot of bubbles. And I cringe every time I see this, but seeing all the guppies makes it a little better. If you're nitpicky like me, you definitely want a near perfect application of this film onto your aquarium. No bubbles there. And then on this one, no bubbles either. Just follow this guide to a T and you should be good. There are going to be 3 sections to this video. 1 will be the material list on all the things that you need. 2 will be the preparation. 3 will be the application of the actual film. As with everything in life, preparation is key, and you'll see in this video, most of the work is going to be done through that prep, and then the actual application phase of this will be a breeze if you do it all correctly. First section will be the supplies that you need. The first thing that I highly recommend you guys buy is a vinyl wrapping toolkit. This toolkit is mainly used for people who are vinyl wrapping in the car scene, but it is applicable in this case as well. The 2 main things that come in this kit that are useful include the X-Acto knife and the squeegee. When it comes to your X-Acto knife, I cannot stress enough that having a sharp blade will make your life a million times easier. The cool thing about this kit is that it comes with a number of replacement blades, so you can always make sure that you have a sharp edge to work with. With regard to the squeegee, you could always use a credit card instead, but the fact that this has a felt tip on the end makes it a lot easier when you're applying that film. Next up, you're gonna need a towel. Preferably, you're gonna need a microfiber towel. The benefit to using a microfiber towel is that you're least likely to leave any lint on your aquarium when you're wiping it down. Next up, you'll need a straight edge. In my case, I use a metal ruler. It is ideal that your edge is metal because you will be running your blade against it as a guide. If you decided not to get the toolkit, the next thing you'll need is a pair of scissors. Next up, you're gonna need a spray bottle and you're gonna fill it up with soapy water. To provide some context on how much soap you wanna use, for my case, I ended up using 6 to 10 pumps of soap. And last but not least, you will need the static window film. I highly recommend you use the one that I linked down below because as you can see here, it is around 23 inches long. You'll see later in the video that this specific width will be beneficial for you, especially if you're using 5-gallon tanks, 10-gallon tanks, or 20-gallon longs. And the reason for that ultimately is because you'll be able to cut this roll in half and utilize these perfect cut edges on each end of the roll. You're not only reducing your costs, but you're also minimizing waste. Everything that I used in this video today will be linked down below in the description. As always, there is no pressure for you guys to use those links, but if you want to support the channel, feel free to use them. So with that section out of the way, let's move into the second part of this video, which is the preparation. In this part of the video, I'm going to instruct you on how to pick the right side to wrap, how to prep that surface of your tank, and lastly, how to begin cutting your vinyl. Before I dive into that, it's important that I discuss my rationale when it comes to the various edges on the tank. So you'll see here, this is a perfectly straight line because this is the top of the roll, and that's why I specifically recommend a roll that you could use one half for one tank and the other half for the other tank, because you'll have at least one edge that will have that perfect line. You're gonna have one rough cut, another rough cut, and then another rough cut. So the key is to use your perfect cut line for the top because this is going to be the most visible area of the tank, and then everywhere else you cut off the extra. You want to have the rough cut on the bottom of the tank because all the mistakes that you have can be easily hidden by substrate, plants, or however you decide to aquascape your tank. When it comes to the two side edges, you do have a margin of error there because each panel is a certain thickness which can hide your mistakes. Now that we talked about the various edges of the tank, I want to briefly discuss the two sides of the film. On the film, you'll see a shiny side and a matte side. So once you peel that off, it'll reveal the side of the film that will be in direct contact with the glass panel. When it comes to deciding which side of your tank you want to wrap, you want to consider two things. One, if there are any scratches on that panel of glass, and two would be if the silicone work is messy or not. Now we're going to begin rough cutting the piece of vinyl. The part of the vinyl that has the perfect cut from the factory, you want to lay against that top edge. From there, you could do a rough cut on the sides and the bottom. You're going to want to leave 1/2 inch to 1 inch of extra material on those 3 other edges. As you're doing that rough cut, it really doesn't matter whether you have the shiny part of the film or the dull part of the film facing up. And if you don't want to struggle like I am in this clip, then you could use some tape to quickly anchor it down as you're doing your rough cuts. The really nice thing about this specific roll that I'll link down below is that it does have grids for you to use as guidelines as you're cutting. It even shows you where the midpoint of the roll is with a different line compared to the other grid lines. So again, highly recommend you go for a 23-inch long roll if you're mostly going to be wrapping 5-gallon tanks, 10-gallon tanks, or 20-gallon longs. Next up is prepping the surface where we're going to put the vinyl on. It really isn't rocket science. Here you can see I'm using the soapy water and my towel. I'm really just wiping any oil, smudges, debris, or lint that may be on that surface. If you really want to be diligent, you can use alcohol wipes, but this is what I had in hand and I just wanted to simplify things. So once your surface is prepped, you're going to want to spray the shiny part of the film. Then you're going to take the shiny part of the film and lay it on the glass. The point of spraying in this step is to create some sort of adhesion to make your life easier as you do your first cut. Once you lay it down, you want to marry the perfectly cut side of your vinyl to the top rim of your tank. If you did your rough cut correctly, you should have extra material on the sides as well as on the bottom. So now you're going to want to take your metal edge, in my case a metal ruler, and wedge it against the bottom rim of the tank. The point of having the metal ruler in this case is to anchor down the material as you're doing your cut so that it doesn't move around and you could have a clean edge. Once you do that, you're going to take your razor or your easy blade and you're going to cut the excess on that bottom edge. As you're making that cut, you want to press the blade against the lower rim of the tank, not against the metal edge or the metal ruler. By doing it this way, you're minimizing the risk of creating a gap between your vinyl and the rim. And again, having a very sharp blade will make your life 10 times easier. So now that your vinyl piece is perfectly cut on the top and the bottom, we are going to move to the third and last section, which is application of the film onto the tank. So at this point in the video, you should still have extra material on the sides. Before we get ahead of ourselves and cut that extra material off, I'm going to have you attach the actual vinyl onto the aquarium. Go to any corner of your film and peel off that shiny protective layer. Removing that protective film will reveal the side of the vinyl that will be attaching to the glass. As soon as you remove the protective film, you're going to want to spray that side of the vinyl as well as your glass panel. I cannot emphasize this enough, but be generous with the amount of soapy water that you spray in this step. If you don't have soapy water dripping down the sides of your tank, chances are you did not spray enough. Spraying too much can't really hurt you in this case, but not spraying enough will create air bubbles upon application. The last thing you want to see when you're admiring your newly set up aquarium is see those cringe-inducing air bubbles staring right at you because you didn't want to use enough soap. Now that you drenched both surfaces with soapy water, you're going to want to slap the two surfaces together. At this point, the matte side of the film should be facing up towards you. The benefit of having soapy water between the two surfaces is now you can micro adjust your film so that it's laid perfectly on the tank. Once you double check everything, take your squeegee and begin squeegeeing out the soap from underneath. A pro tip that I learned when applying vinyl onto my actual car is that whenever you squeegee, you always want to start from the center and squeegee outward. The reason why you want to squeegee in this pattern is because if you do introduce any stretch into your film, you're evenly distributing it across the entire panel. As you can see here, I periodically go in with a towel to dry the surface. If for whatever reason you're unhappy with how part of your film is laying down, you could always peel it back up, spray it with soapy water, and then relay it and re-squeegee it. So now, once it is laid down, we can finally cut the extra pieces off on the sides. And the reason I say this for last is because once it's laid down, it makes it 10 times easier for you to go in and get a clean cut. I actually got this tip from watching some of MD Fish Tank's videos. The common mistake I see here is that people will take their blade and use the edge of the aquarium as a guide to cut off the extra material. But what I found with this method is that since the material isn't completely attached to the tank yet, you increase the chance of the vinyl lifting up as you're doing that cut, creating a messy rough cut edge. So what Empty Fish Tanks does is he takes a metal ruler and lays it along the side of the aquarium. He'll then create a 1 to 2 millimeter gap between the actual edge of the tank and the edge of the ruler, just enough space for your blade to run through. As you're cutting your extra material off, you're going to want to use your blade and lean it against the side of the metal ruler. The end result is a much cleaner cut, and you won't even see a gap because these side panels have a certain thickness to them. For those of you who are going to ask why I didn't save cutting the bottom edge until after we laid the vinyl, the reason for that is because there is a rim on that bottom. So having that elevated edge on the bottom makes cutting the film 10 times harder. Once all is said and done and you applied the backing on your aquarium and you want to move your tank to either the shelf or the table or the stand that you're going to be putting it on, make sure you don't grab your tank by that back panel because you could potentially stretch the material and create air bubbles after the fact. Grab it by the sides, the front, or the bottom. Anyway, there you guys have it. If this video brought any value to you, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. All the items I used today will be linked down in the description. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Pharmaquatics. Check out my blog, pharmaquatics.com, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.